If you've never heard of the city Wuhan before, you certainly have now. Wuhan, a city of 11 million people, the size of London, is the capital city of the central China's Hubei Province. Chinese authorities have confirmed a city-wide lockdown to combat a new deadly virus labeled COVID-19. Wuhan went into a then unprecedented lockdown at a time where the virus had killed 17 people and affected more than 400. A city larger than New York is fighting for its life. A new rapidly spreading dangerous disease, a killer virus, has hit the streets of Wuhan. Only now we know how vicious and infectious this mutating virus actually is. This was the start of the worst pandemic in a century. The human costs extracted by the world's largest known quarantine in China may never be known. The people of Wuhan sent a warning shot to the entire global civilization that COVID-19 was a virus to be feared. China had confirmed 90,000 cases of COVID-19 and 4,739 deaths, while the United States has registered 100 times more, 9 million cases, and a staggering 229,000 deaths to date. All of which raises the question, how has China managed to wrest control of its pandemic? With a country-wide implementation of a contact tracing app, a centralized epidemic response system, 14,000 health checkpoints were established, and public transport was suspended. On the 5th of February 2020, Wuhan had opened its emergency hospitals. Track and trace systems to identify and isolate people who might be spreading the illness, rigorous and speedy countermeasures, were a crucial factor in containing the virus.
The current timeline for the COVID-19 pandemic begins with a cluster of viral pneumonia cases that emerged in Wuhan in late December 2019 and reported to the World Health Organization on the 31st of December 2019. By the 7th of January, China had isolated a sample of the novel coronavirus, sharing its genetic sequence with the world to develop diagnostic kits on the 12th of January. The next day, Thailand reported its first lab-confirmed case, followed by Japan on the 15th, South Korea on the 20th, and the US on the 21st. As the virus spread around the world, Wuhan went into lockdown.
The whole thing in itself is kind of like the perfect storm. What happened was not only did the virus start at that time, but it started at a time where, it's the largest human land mass migration in the world. It's like millions of people are traveling back from other countries, from other parts of China, all to go back to their home town for Spring Festival. Spring Festival is it's as important as it's Christmas.
And we knew around the Chinese New Year that there was a problem. When they closed down the Hubei Province, it was like now. It went quickly from the city of Wuhan, 11 million, to the entire Hubei Province. 60 million people were pretty much quarantined.
We heard the news reports of there's been this outbreak of some kind of viral flu type thing. And it wasn't really deemed as being that serious. And then the next day, we'd been told to be cautious about going too many places, but it still wasn't really serious. So it built and it built and it built. And I remember us going from going out to a meal and wearing masks to being right, all the meals for Spring Festival are cancelled, everything is off, and that in itself, if you know China, is massive red flag. So you could still go out and there was a lot of temperature checks, but they handled it really, really well. They handled it amazing.
See, I live in Wenzhou is on a lockdown, so it is going to be restricted access. It's going to be basically the same as in Wuhan. There's a lot of common misconceptions with the fact that people think everybody is locked in their houses in Wuhan, and it's not. It's here from today, apparently we are only allowed to go out. We are allowed to nominate one person to go out every other day. So every 2 days, basically, something like that, to buy food. And they ask that you stay in at home.
房号多少呀？
15栋142。
15栋142。 您把您的名字写一下在这儿，好吗？
好。
When we were looking at the maps that were available, the trackers, they would show up with little colored dots in terms of where the positive cases were showing up. And it started closing in on us around our building. We started seeing around our neighborhood all the buildings with confirmed cases. And during that time, if you had a confirmed case, your entire building goes on lockdown. They took it quite seriously. So we were worried about that happening to us. But luckily, our building in particular didn't get locked down. We didn't have any confirmed cases in our building.
So it was just before Chinese New Year, and we were planning to travel to Changsha for the Chinese New Year celebration. As you know, that's a big thing, and we were going there with all the family. Maybe a week or so before that, we started hearing rumours of a new strange flu-like virus that was affecting people in Wuhan. And then there was the odd reports of other incidents of this in a few other places. And over the next sort of 7 to 10 days, things got much more serious, and the sort of authorities started making announcements that it was not a good idea to travel, and we cancelled our tickets. And then very shortly after, we're in Shenzhen. And although Shenzhen wasn't a place that was badly affected, there were still cases there. So pretty much the whole of China. So it was first Wuhan, and then pretty much the rest of China went into what was called lockdown.
So I started to release some of my videos out of Chongqing, and I returned from Chongqing in mid to late January of this year. And I started to get a bunch of, people emailing me, sending comments on my video saying, what's going on in China? Have you heard about this virus? Do you know about this coronavirus? And it started to accelerate very quickly. Now, I was communicating with my family in Canada, and other people across the world were also saying, hey, what is going on in Asia? So I thought, we need to find a doctor, and we need to find a doctor in Wuhan that can actually answer these questions. So I reached out to Kurt, who is another YouTube content creator, and Kurt knew a military doctor that was traveling from Chongqing to one of the hospitals in Ground Zero in Wuhan. And we quickly got him on a live stream to answer people's questions. Some people thought this was a hoax. Some people said there's no way this could be happening. And he answered a lot of questions. And the video you're about to see now is the video that I asked him if he could actually walk through the hospital and show us what it's like at Ground Zero.
我们住的这个地方是武汉市高速铁路培训中心，又叫高铁训练段。我们是每个人住一个标间，这是他们写的一些表示感谢的一些标语。我们上班就是在这里，上班就是在这里坐公交车。在这儿上公交车要坐1个小时左右才到医院。这边就是这个培训中心，这个学校，这边是个足球场，这是他们的教学楼，这里有一个广告牌。啊，又坐这个车。 们就是坐这个巴士过来的。你看到这个方向，的这些所有的建筑就是我们这个医院，叫泰康医院、泰康同济医院这些建筑。因为我们是走的医生通道是北门，患者是走南门，我们走不同的通道进去的。好，从这个通道进去。从这个通道进去。这边就是我们医院，这几栋高楼，这几栋楼全部都是。我们上班就在最里面这栋楼。我们来的时候，这医院就还没竣工，外面好的设施都还没完善。这医院是一个私人医院、私立医院，还没修完。然后我们来到才准备好，才开始收病人。
As we were watching the video, the doctor was explaining that they needed to prepare so many layers of protection that they needed additional help from other doctors and nurses on the location.
First,
帮你送
好。现在到这儿ถือว่า
It was very comforting to watch the doctor explain to us his daily work schedule and how they were dealing with patients. He was saying that they spend approximately 12 hours a day on a shift, 6 hours at least with patients, and then a lot of documentation work. Now this is on a hospital on ground zero in Wuhan. We were finally getting an understanding on what this epidemic was all about and what the coronavirus was all about.
好，我给你看一下这个病房的大概的布局啊。这是我，这镜子里面是我，然后这是病床啊，病床，这是今天新进来的新病人，然后这里面有一个空气消毒机，然后这是卫生间，这是病人用的柜子。好，因为下面我要问病人的病史，涉及到隐私，我就不再录制那个视频了哈。好的，好，再见。
There was a lot of misinformation. You can see videos on my channel about how CBC News, a pretty big deal in Canada, and they lied about stuff that was happening right here on the ground in Wenzhou. So myself and a lot of the other people, you know, like Kirk, Whaler60, Alex Report Found Media, a lot of people were, you know, we all bound together and we kind of just showed what was actually happening. Like the good, the bad, the ugly. And then with that kind of information, you can't fight against actual proof of showing someone with a video. You can't deny that. I had people from other parts of the world, I'm guessing America, telling me exactly how it was in China and how I knew nothing about it, because I was obviously locked up in my house. So I used one of these trips outside to go in my car, took my camera, and I filmed like the whole thing.
I had started doing some basically daily videos for about 35 or 40 days covering the virus. I was reading a lot of and seeing a lot of conflicting information from Western media about what was actually happening in China. And I wanted to kind of dispel that. Even though I had a small platform, at least if I could have my subscribers, my followers hear the truth from a guy that's actually here, that they would look at China and how they handle it differently, because what we saw here was completely different from what the West was doing. And I wanted people to know and be prepared, because really what kind of motivated me to do the videos is when they shut Wuhan down. You just don't shut down a city of 11 million people where nobody can go in and nobody can leave. I mean, to me, actions speak louder than words. And when you shut down a city of 11 million people, that means it's pretty serious.
When this all hit, I knew Dr. Robert. He's a doctor that was in Chongqing, but he was called to Wuhan at that time. And we sort of dispelled a lot of the rhetoric about this by talking to him a couple of times. And we had a couple of videos with Alex, Dr. Robert, and myself. And we'd ask him these questions, say, are people actually dying in Wuhan? He says, well, yeah, they are. He says, no, on the street. He says, no, he says, that's stupid.
I think it was effective that, when the Chinese said, look, we're going to close down the entire Hubei Province with Wuhan, do you think that was the right move to do? Quarantining 60 million people?
Definitely. I definitely think it's a right move, because, actually I read a newspaper yesterday. It's a very respected doctor who leads a statistic research team. And they had a formula or some kind of calculating system working out. They said that if we shut down the whole province 5 days later, and the total infected number would be 5 times of what we have now. Here, the things work differently. Here in China, people actually trust the government. It doesn't like in America or in other country. We don't, argue. We don't, we're not skeptical about the government, what they do things. Here we actually do have this mutual trust. And why would they cover that? Because at the very beginning, if the government want to cover this, it's because they don't want panic. Now, because we have passed the phase of panicking, everybody knows it's a big deal. It's a serious situation.
Is China going to be okay? Coming up, are we all right?
China will be okay at now. 10 years from now, 100 years from now, China is going to be okay. So thank you for your worry.
Well, there's a clip actually where they're taking a person out of a building and they're putting them in a box on the back of a pickup truck. You've seen that one?
Yeah, I did.
I mean, that's literally a clip from a completely different situation.
Another thing they were saying is because of the particles in the air, they could tell that they were incinerating hundreds of thousands of Chinese people that had died from the COVID.
Yeah. And the urns and the millions of urns or whatever that were being shipped in by trucks and
when we see something like that, you sort of got to ask, is it real or is it not? Or if you don't say anything and the only information that you get is from mainstream media and they're spouting shit, then everybody's going to believe that.
Yep.
Then there would be that other side of the story, and I think the Chinese government doesn't do enough of that.
During that time, I was watching a lot of foreign media or listening to what even foreign vloggers were saying. And even though they were outside of China, they were quite convinced that the numbers were underreported in China. And I didn't necessarily fall into the trap of believing what they were saying, especially with how little information they had outside of China. It was just more of a theoretical thing. How would you expect the Chinese government to give you the real numbers kind of a skepticism? And but it still is important to ask critical questions. So of course we wondered here, we said, are the numbers real? Thankfully we had somebody we knew on the front lines, my sister-in-law in Zhejiang province. She was one of the government workers who was going around from home to home taking care of people who weren't feeling well or had fevers that they had to check up on. And we asked her, we said, what do you think? Do you think the numbers are real? And she said, yes, she thinks the numbers are real, but she also thinks there's a lot of cases, at-home cases, that haven't been confirmed as a coronavirus case yet, but actually are. And sure enough, later on, as the pandemic was kind of being brought under control here, you saw that one day where there was a huge jump in cases. And that's exactly what happened. They went back over their old cases and they said, okay, these were actually coronavirus related. It's not too unlike what was happening overseas. In New York, they had a period of time where all of a sudden they added a bunch of new cases also, and it was because of those old, previously undiagnosed cases. During that time, we obviously there was some reflection about how the media works here too, because it's not as open as overseas. And so the question was, are we getting honest reporting? Because there's not a bunch of people with different opinions showing up in the news. And so that's one of the negative sides, but the positive side is that I'm convinced that if the media worked here the same way that it did overseas, we would have run into a lot of the same strange problems, such as running out of toilet paper in the shops, sending people into a panic, or the opposite end of things, having talking heads on TV saying it's not that serious, you don't need to wear a mask. I think it would have been an absolute disaster for China if that happened.
When you sort of look at it, a developing country like China taking care of something like this, and then you get all of these first world, and not just one, but all of these first world countries are sort of dropping the ball.
Yeah.
It's scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
And thinking that our governments were all that and more, and then you get a developing country that actually took care of it better than we did, or our governments did.
Yeah. It's a bit strange.
How do you figure? How did that happen?
There's freedom in America that they pride themselves, or ourselves, on. And that freedom is, I guess, the freedom to believe anything you want to believe. You can not believe the science, you can not believe that the virus exists, and all it takes is a few people that don't believe those things, and it sets the recovery process or this plan to kind of recover from something like this into chaos. And if you don't have a plan in the first place, and your leaders are giving you different marching orders than others, it's really tough.
And then if you do it in China, and the Chinese government says, no, you're locked down.
You can't go. You stay in your house.
You can't do this and you can't do that. Well, you listen, because they will throw your ass in jail if you don't listen.
Yeah. But most people followed the rules.
All the time I've ever spent in China, I've never seen the streets so empty as they were at that time. And there was a completely unified message right from the government, from the national government to the local government of exactly what to do. Stay indoors, wear masks, wash your hands, all of these kind of things. And it was all the same unified message. And pretty much the whole of the Chinese population followed those measures. Program of testing was just unbelievable. It was on a mass scale. As soon as they saw a small outbreak again, or somebody tested positive, they were on it. We all used a track and trace app, so we'd scan ourselves in and out of everywhere. Temperatures were taken everywhere we went. And I will say, all the people here in China and around me here in Shenzhen, we did remarkably well. Everybody stuck to the rules, and it's kind of probably one of the safest places in the world to be now.
I was collaborating with Kurt. I was initially supposed to be going to Nanning in February, and Kurt actually ended up coming here to Thailand, as he was going to eventually go back to Canada. And Canada was closing its borders as well. And I ended up having Kurt stay here for months. It developed into quite a good friendship. And he said to me one day, we need to reach out to the Chinese community. We need to talk to people. And that's where the Let's Talk China was born. We wanted to be a voice for China.
I remember Alex and I were sitting in Thailand during the COVID-19 thing, and everybody was telling us, talking bad about Wuhan, about China, about the China virus and stuff, and we were thinking about what we could do to sort of counter that. And because we were talking about China, we thought, well, let's set up a Let's Talk China talk show for Saturday mornings.
And that's where it came from?
Well, that's where it came from, and we invited a bunch of people, and you were one of them. And during that time period, we sort of tried to counter a lot of that rhetoric against China.
We have a very interesting voice with regards to the place that we live and the place that we were born from in this whole mess.
So I basically stayed in my apartment for the most part of February, and by middle March I was back at the factory resuming my work. So for me and many of us in China, we pretty much had life resumed back to some normalcy for months now. while many parts of the world are still coming to terms with this situation.
The government has done a phenomenal job in responding to this. And I'll have to give credit to the Chinese citizens. The Chinese responded. I mean, it was like one unified team that fought against the virus. And you know, it's not that fight where you think about going out to a battlefield and fighting with people physically. It was the complete opposite. It was just staying home. It was doing what you were told, what the authorities were telling them to do. It was wearing masks. It was implementing a contact tracing system that is beyond, to me, it's beyond belief at how well this thing works. It was the social distancing. It was obeying the quarantines and people quarantining themselves voluntarily and doing it religiously. That's the reason why China is where it's at now. And so between the government and the people, man, I just gotta say, Jayo. I think it's cool to have been a part of this process.
You know, here they turned, for example, the delivery guys, the ordinary delivery guys who deliver food, they turned them into heroes also. And they are in their own right. They were showing up during the pandemic, putting themselves at risk, going from home to home, delivering food, so that we could still continue eating and enjoying a normal life. It was one of the things I thought about when we went to the grocery store also, seeing those workers show up. Even though a lot of people were worried during that time, a lot of people just wanted to stay at home and not go outside, but they showed up at work so that we could still survive ourselves. So now when people look at these kinds of workers, there's a whole new level of respect for them. And I think that's a positive thing that came out of this.
Actually, this city now has back to normal, 90% at least, right? And everybody is like go to work normally, and just in some public areas crowded, we still wear masks, and that's the thing. So the situation gets much better, and back to normal already now. As normal people, we just listen to the suggestions from some experts, and also like the arrangements from the different departments that keep us safe to quarantine at home. So that's true, and there was no people on the street, and also we are just trying to protect ourselves. And also we saw like a lot of staffs, public servants, they were out to combat, they fight at the front line to curb the spread of COVID-19. So it was quite touching moment.
For the people of Wuhan who has suffered and sacrificed so much, you know, mothers who are nurses unable to hug their children, elderly retired doctors coming back to volunteer, they afforded me the chance, and they spared me basically any chance of suffering and sacrificing. And for that, I will always be grateful.
Chongqing and Xiaogan have sort of a long-standing relationship and some ancient history. Chongqing and Heilongjiang are sharing medical staff and supplies to Xiaogan, about 40 kilometers northwest of Wuhan, where the epicenter is. March 3rd, a total of 344 medical teams, about 42,322 or something medical staff have been sent to Hubei to fight this epidemic. Chongqing has sent 18 teams to Xiaogan and a total of 812 medical workers, 6 experts as hospital leaders to train medical staff in the city's central hospital. The efficiency of this national strategy also became apparent already on the evening of the Chinese Spring Festival, when the first team of 150 medical staff were sent from Chongqing to Hubei. It only took 6 hours to put the team together after the notice was issued by the central Chinese government, something that you wouldn't easily be able to accomplish in any other country, especially not leading up to what is the biggest holiday of the year. Xiaogan has actually also received donations from Chongqing residents from all walks of life to about $2.8 million worth as well.
China handled it amazingly. China really did handle it fantastically. You can tell that just by the fact that now it's almost like a distant memory for me. While I see it on the news and all this kind of stuff where people are still, like, businesses are still shut down, people are, protesting about not wearing masks and that kind of ridiculous stuff. Like, here, I've been back at work since May. So a long time, months and months.
Now when I think back, it's only been a little bit more than half a year, but it does feel like it's been a long time, and probably because so much was going on at the time, it almost becomes really blurry. You have to be reminded of what are the things that actually happened. Maybe it's a really weird psychological thing. Now I think back on the first 3 months of 2020, it almost feels like a lifetime ago. Right now, things are pretty much back to normal for all the people that I know, all the friends back in China, and a good friend of mine actually had her baby during this time, early April. So I was really happy for her that by that time the situation was really pretty much under full control in China.
Things happened around the world which is not good. I decided to stay in China and support the Chinese people throughout this whole pandemic. Mentally we were struggling, financially we were struggling, but in the end the Chinese had this fantastic systems they basically put in place to help foreign as well as their own people. We pushed through. It went well. Today, like I say, I'm standing here going onto a cable car. As you can see, a lot of people behind me. China is back to normal while the rest of the world is still struggling. And I believe it's because they don't follow great systems. So if I say China has got great systems, I mean it. We have face masks on still, and the only reason is the protection for the people that's around us. So, and man, I'm just happy we made it through this pandemic. So stay strong out there, guys.
I have extended family members who have passed away in New York City from this. I have an aunt who caught it herself, and she had a really tough time. She was in the hospital for a couple months, and it's not a pleasant thing. So my thoughts are with these countries now. I hope that they can bring their life back to normal like China has, or at least a new kind of normal, because obviously I think life will never be the same now.
My wife and I, we live in a suburb of Vancouver called Richmond, and Richmond, Canada is home to approximately about 70% of Chinese population here. We have a very vibrant Chinese community, and it actually really helped the city of Vancouver and the province of British Columbia get well ahead of the COVID-19 spread. You see, my wife and I started to notice around in mid-February that the Chinese shopping malls and the Chinese restaurants that we frequently visited started to have significantly less visitors than normal. And when we did see visitors there that were Chinese nationals, we saw most of them were wearing facial masks. Now my wife and I, we just realized that, as we started talking to people, that many of them thought that the coronavirus was actually going to start spreading around the world. And they essentially started to isolate themselves, and when they did need to get out, they started wearing facial masks very early. Now, for the most part, British Columbia and the city of Vancouver and Richmond have actually been one of the best places in North America to be during this pandemic. We've experienced extremely low rates of COVID-19, and I really do think it's because of the Chinese community here that has actually, really helped curb the spread.
So, what do I remember regarding the start of the pandemic in Italy? I think in January or February we had the first 2 cases, 2 Chinese people in Rome, and they were quickly cured, so there was no panic mode in action. Then later the cases, oh my gosh, the numbers started going so much up that in the north of Italy everybody was so incredibly scared.
I think is really great about the YouTube community is that overall it is a really positive, uplifting sort of space, and especially in the travel sector, I think we've all had to kind of, uplift each other and kind of know that things are going to get better, hopefully, over time. And as things open up, I think there is beginning to be a light at the end of the tunnel, and we are understanding how to deal with this virus better. So I really am hoping that 2021 is going to be a less chaotic sort of year, because 2020 has been more than enough for a very long time.
So today is day 3 of the extended lockdown for the Russian city of Rostov-on-Don. The original one kind of consisted of government buildings being closed and things like this, but they decided to make it more stringent and basically said that people aren't allowed to go more than 100 meters from their front door. That is, if they're walking their dogs or something like this. Now it says they are allowed to go to a store to buy food and things like this. I was kind of surprised at the fact that the streets aren't totally empty here in Rostov. As you can see, there's many cars driving down the street right now. This is no joke. People need to get ready. People need to get their families ready, get supplies, and get ready for the storm, because this is going to be like World War III, the world against the coronavirus. It's pretty interesting. It's like an abandoned mall here. Virtually 99% of the stores here are closed. Pharmacy, no disinfectant, no masks. Hopefully there'll be some soon, but we don't know.
2020 has been a really complicated and difficult year. Usually I travel back to China every year from Canada, which is where I am right now. Earlier this year, in late January and February, which was the worst time when this pandemic is happening in China, and at that time Canada wasn't affected by it. But it doesn't mean my life was easy at the time, because my friends, my family are all back in China. I get daily updates about their life, what's going on. Pretty much glued to my chat apps and also Weibo all the time, just to see what is the latest development, what are the updates that's happening to the people that I care about. And when the situation in China started to get better, it was the rest of the world's turn to get hit by this. So in a way, as overseas Chinese, I kind of have the longest run of this thing, starting from the very beginning.
When it kind of started to get a little bit serious was when we got like information from our Prime Minister, I'm from the UK, you should come back to the UK. And that kind of worried us a little bit, and we had a serious think about it. Obviously, we are in China, this is where the outbreak is, what do we do? But for us, we decided the best thing was actually to stay, because we've been in China for a couple of years and China is our home right now. In hindsight, it was actually the best choice for us. Eventually now, a few months later, it seems like the worst of it is over. People just kind of chose to stay inside, and the streets of Beijing were empty for weeks. I mean, if it wasn't a necessity, people just didn't go out. We started producing quite a lot of YouTube content. At first, we weren't sure whether to post about coronavirus, but as it kind of started to escalate a little bit more, we realized that it wasn't going away anytime soon, and people were wanting to know what was actually happening here in China, because obviously what they were seeing in Wuhan is completely different to what was happening like all around the country. I think people forget just how big China is.
COVID-19 was really the perfect storm because it happened right during Chinese New Year when everybody wanted to go to their hometown, and Wuhan is a migrant city, so lots of people are not from Wuhan and they live all over China. Before they did the lockdown in Wuhan, half the people had already left. I have been living in China for about 9 years now, and I was there just when the pandemic was starting. My original plan was just to stay in China during the whole pandemic and just wait it out, but things got a bit worse and a lot of countries started closing their borders, and it seemed like Beijing was going to be the next big outbreak. Nobody is out, and it's just kind of like a ghost town. No one wants to eat at any of these restaurants. This
place is empty too.
And everywhere else is just closed.
It was almost like it was this flu bug, but nobody here was really paying attention to it being that serious. And you know, as the days progressed, the rules and regulations got more and more strict. You had to wear a mask on the metro, you had to wear a mask in the taxi cab, and a DD, which is kind of like the Uber here. It was about January 22nd that I got a message from my boss at the school and he said that classes are canceled for the rest of the day, you need to go home. And I asked him, I said, well, when are we coming back? And he says, we don't know, it's going to be indefinite. So it kind of hit me then emotionally that, hey, this is pretty serious. And that was about the same time that Wuhan was closed. Between those two, it really hit home. But I will tell you, when it really hit home was when I told Tui Tui, my girlfriend now, she's my wife now, and her mother and dad that I was staying. I remember we were sitting at the table having lunch, and I know in the back of in their minds they were thinking about this, wondering if I wanted to return, wanted to go back to avoid this. But I never wanted to. I didn't want to because I felt like if I left, I would be abandoning them, and that they needed me, and that I also needed them. I care for them deeply. They're my Chinese family, and it felt okay knowing at the time my family and my friends were safe and that there was no need for me to go back. I thought to myself, I could actually die here in China from this, because not a lot was known back then, and it was a gut punch. You know, it was a surreal moment. And I was glad I made the decision because in China, things are great.
I think that the idea of being able to share your true-to-life experience on the ground, whether it's right or wrong, it's ours, right?
Well, exactly.
It's our right. It's our belief because we are here on the ground, you know what I mean? So it's a very valuable opinion, and I'm glad that we were able to share it in the way that we did.
It's what we see, we hear,
Exactly.
and we believe, because we are actually here on the ground in China and have been for how many years been here?
Decade.
A decade.
11 years now.
Yeah. I'm going on to my 18th year, you guys. It's one of those things. So if you want to, if you actually want the truth about what's going on in China, you should be listening to the people on the ground in China, like the YouTubers like Daniel Dumbrell, Lee Barrett, Alex.
It was a really strange time, really. Myself and Ollie, we put our heads down and we just concentrated on our YouTube channel. I sort of noticed that there was a lot of fake and misrepresentation of the coronavirus in Western media and on YouTube. So I started a sort of daily update of this coronavirus and what was going on here in China. And literally for the whole of maybe 35 days, I put a sort of piece of content together which I released on a daily basis that sort of gave the facts and the figures of what was actually happening here on the ground. During that time I spoke to people in different parts of China, and that kept me busy through a lot of the lockdown time.
But it's definitely not the end of days that people are going on about. There's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of people on Reddit which were telling me, what would you know? You're just holed up at home. I know much more, and I've never been to China, and I live in America, like the other side of the world, and we've had 2 cases, so I must know more, because I've watched some sensationalized news headlines. That's what's really annoying me. It's just these sensationalized news headlines which kind of are providing panic.
I got acquainted with Alex from Reportify Media through the Let's Talk China live stream, and it's because I had been watching videos from Daniel Dumbrell, Guilao60 and the Barretts. These guys I call the Band of Brothers because they have the voice that they are broadcasting out. They have the critical thinking to analyze beyond the noise, and they present facts, they present the truth, and it is really comforting for me to know that there are people out there who shares my same sentiments, who are like-minded.
I was hearing words like contact tracing and social distancing, and masks were coming into Asia very quickly. Here in Thailand, we pretty much shut down immediately. There was even alcohol bans here. There's, of course, social distancing, mandatory masks. Borders were absolutely shut down, closed. No going in, pretty much no going out, and still to this day we are actually kind of like in a bit of a lockdown here, where no foreigners are pretty much not allowed into the country, similar to China with some easing at this time. But you know, seeing what's going on in Asia here and then following what's going on in the rest of the world, these other countries that are still trying to grasp with this problem. And you know, a lot can be learned from this. You know, China did act very quickly at the start. One thing I did notice was unity, a unity throughout a nation that got behind each other and really to combat this. Blaming Wuhan? No one is to blame.
Despite China's effective response containing the virus and giving the rest of the world ample time to take health precautions, China has actually set a new standard for outbreak response. China has sacrificed a province to save the world from coronavirus, yet was the subject to public humiliation. A barrage of abusive publicity, claims of false statistics, and cover-up conspiracies have overtaken media. From virus origin theories to unfounded allegations of Chinese manipulation of the World Health Organization. Despite media sensationalism, China moved forward. The efforts taken were so successful that on the 8th of April, Wuhan's lockdown was officially lifted. The city has not had a local case since mid-May, and about 9.9 million people in the city have been tested for the virus. China is the first major country to return to normal and has resumed growth. With more than 1.4 billion people involved, the country passed an extraordinary and historic test. Commitment to the greater good, resilience, unity, and a sense of responsibility, respect for science, and capacity to make sacrifices has made China victorious in the face of this pandemic, a source of hope and inspiration to the rest of the world. Wuhan has engineered a blueprint for the rest of the world to follow.